Her father, too, had been taken into custody, but the man he had become in her eyes, the one who had kept so many secrets from her, was someone she couldn't even begin to reconcile with the man she had once trusted. Sarah was safe, but the bond between them was forever fractured, the deep trust they had shared obliterated by the lies, the betrayals, and the unspoken truths. No one, it seemed, was without blame, and yet Emma couldn't quite bring herself to fully hate them. She had learned that sometimes the worst enemies were the ones who smiled the hardest, and the ones you loved most were the ones who could hurt you the deepest. She sat in the quiet of her room, the soft hum of the house around her like a distant memory, as the reality of the past few weeks hit her once more. The revelations had been staggering, but the most painful part of it all was realizing just how far they had gone to keep her in the dark. The whispers at the campfire, the strange coincidences, the hidden messages, all of it had led her down this treacherous path, and it was only through sheer will that she had survived. There was no going back now. The past was gone, and so much had been lost in the process. Jason's disappearance remained unsolved, but Emma had come to terms with the fact that some things, some truths, were too dangerous to uncover. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that some answers were buried for a reason. But even now, as the dust settled, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something remained just beyond her grasp. There was a lingering question that wouldn't leave her, one that had been gnawing at her for days, and it wasn't about Jason anymore. It was about them. The people who had orchestrated this entire nightmare, the ones who had played her like a pawn in their game. The ones who had been watching her, pulling strings from the shadows, making sure she never found out what they were really up to. Derek, her father, even Sarah, they had all been pawns, too. The conspiracy was bigger than any of them, and even though the people involved had been arrested, there was something about the way they had acted that made Emma wonder if this was really the end. Was it possible that the true masterminds were still out there, waiting? Watching her? She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this was far from over. As she stared out the window at the rising sun, a part of her wished she could simply let go, move on with her life, and try to forget everything. But that would never be possible. The questions had already been asked, the doors already opened. No, there was no going back. And then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed. Her heart skipped a beat. It was a message. From an unknown number. You think you're safe now, but you're not. The game isn't over. Not yet. Her hand shook as she read the words. The message was chilling, its simplicity sending a cold shiver down her spine. Emma's mind raced, her stomach tightening. The voice in the back of her head, the one that had been warning her all along, now screamed at her to pay attention. The truth may have been out, but the story was far from finished. With a shaky breath, Emma stood up, her legs unsteady but determined. She had been to hell and back, and she wasn't going to let it all be for nothing. Whatever was waiting for her, whatever came next, she would face it head on. Because there was one thing she had learned, truth was a weapon, and once it was unleashed, it was impossible to put back in the box. She wiped away the last tear she had been holding back, picked up her phone, and hit the reply button. I'm ready. As she sent the message, the weight of what she had just done hit her. But there was no turning back now. The game was still in play, and as much as she hated it, Emma knew that her quest for answers wasn't over. It had only just begun. The screen on her phone flickered, the final message reading, "We'll be watching you." The question lingered in her mind like a shadow, one that would never leave her. Who were they really, and what did they want from her? The story was far from over. And Emma was no longer just a player, she was part of something much bigger, something she couldn't even begin to comprehend. And as she stood there, staring at the phone in her hand, she realized with a jolt of understanding that she would never be able to escape the game. The mystery would always be a part of her, a dark, twisting thread that bound her to something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. And the world. It would never be the same. I just want you to be safe, he said softly, stepping back to let her pass. Please. Don't dig any deeper. You don't know what you might find. Emma was left standing there, her heart pounding in her chest, as Derek turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted. The warning wasn't just a friendly piece of advice, it was a threat. And that meant only one thing: someone knew something, and they were doing everything they could to stop her from uncovering the truth. But who? Was it Derek? Was he somehow involved in Jason's disappearance? Or was there someone else, someone even closer to her than she realized, pulling the strings from behind the scenes? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making it harder to trust anyone. The walls were closing in, and Emma felt more alone than ever. But despite the warnings, the missing evidence, and the mounting fear that she was getting too close, Emma knew she couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close to the truth. The question was no longer just about what had happened to Jason, it was about who was keeping her from finding out. And why? The woods are silent, save for the occasional rustle of leaves and the snap of twigs beneath your feet. You're lost in conversation, the gentle sounds of nature lulling you into a peaceful state. But suddenly, something changes, something unexplainable. A voice, soft and distant, whispers your name. At first, you think it's nothing. Maybe the wind. A trick of the firelight playing with your senses. But then it happens again. This time, the whisper is clear. It's a voice you know. It's a voice you've been longing to hear for over 20 years. It's your brother's voice. In that moment, you freeze. Your heart stops, and your mind races. Could it be? Could he be alive? Or is it just your mind playing tricks on you? A cruel game of wishful thinking after years of unanswered questions. The voice, so familiar, beckons you from the dark, and the shadows seem to shift as if responding to its call. What would you do? What would you believe? You're about to hear a story that will send chills down your spine and make you question everything you thought you knew about family, loss, and the mysteries that linger in the spaces between the living and the dead. This is the story of a sister who thought she had lost her brother forever, only to hear his voice again after all these years at a campfire, in the dead of night, in the woods where he disappeared without a trace back in 2002. Sounds impossible, doesn't it? Well, buckle up, because this story is about to take you on a wild, emotional, and mysterious journey. You'll experience the fear, the hope, and the heartbreaking realization that not everything in this world can be explained away by logic. Now, before we dive deeper, let me ask you this. Have you ever felt like there's something out there, just beyond your understanding, calling to you, trying to reach you? Have you ever had that one moment when something happens that you just can't explain, no matter how hard you try? Maybe it's a feeling, a sudden shift in the air, or an experience so surreal that you can't shake it from your mind. Well, that's exactly what happened to this sister, let's call her Emma. She thought she had finally made peace with the loss of her brother, Jason. You see, Jason had disappeared without a trace during a camping trip with friends, leaving behind nothing but unanswered questions, heartbreak, and an emptiness that never quite left. For years, Emma struggled with the uncertainty. She lived in the belief that Jason was gone, lost to the woods, to time, or perhaps something more sinister. No body was ever found, and no clues were ever uncovered. But then, one summer night, Emma returned to those same woods, with friends who didn't know the history, with no idea of the shock and revelations that lay ahead. She thought she was simply going back for closure, to visit the place where Jason had last been seen, to finally say goodbye. What she wasn't prepared for, what she never expected, was that the forest would speak back to her. This wasn't just another night of reminiscing, it was the beginning of a journey that would shake her to the core, unravel everything she thought she knew, and lead her down a path that would leave her questioning the very nature of reality. As you listen to Emma's story, I want you to put yourself in her shoes. Imagine the pain of losing someone you love, someone you'd never thought you'd see again. Now imagine the impossible, the feeling of hearing their voice after so many years of silence. What would you do if that voice, that whisper, was the only thing standing between you and the truth? Would you chase it? Or would you run away, too scared to face whatever was waiting for you in the darkness? This is a tale that explores the boundaries of grief, the power of hope, and the terrifying possibility that sometimes, the dead may not be as far away as we think. The forest, the whispers, and the possibility of reconnecting with someone lost to time, it's all part of something much bigger than Emma ever imagined. But what's the truth behind that whisper? Is it truly Jason's voice calling her home, or is there something darker at play? And why, after all these years, is he reaching out now? Why on this particular night, in this particular place? Now, I know what you're probably thinking, how is this possible? How could anyone hear the voice of someone who's been gone for over 2 decades? Well, trust me, You're going to want to stick around because by the end of this video, all your questions will be answered. But here's the thing. This story is not just about a sister and her brother. It's about all of us, the connections we make, the things we believe in, and the mysteries that continue to haunt us long after the people we love are gone. We all have those questions, those what ifs, that linger in the back of our minds, and this story will make you confront them head on. I know you're already hooked. But let me tell you, the twists are just beginning. Emma's search for answers will take you to places you never thought possible, and the truth she uncovers will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about the world around you. But before we go any further, let's set the stage a little more. Emma and Jason were close. They were more than just siblings, they were best friends. Their childhood was filled with laughter, adventures, and secrets they swore they'd never share with anyone else. But when Jason disappeared, Emma's world shattered. The police were called, search parties were organized, and every lead seemed to lead to nothing. The years passed, but Emma never gave up hope. She kept his room just the way it was, she held on to his belongings, and she kept alive the memory of her brother in the only way she could. She tried to move on, but she couldn't forget. How could she? Jason was her little brother. The one person who understood her completely. And then, that night by the campfire, everything changed. I want you to imagine how that moment felt sitting in the same place where your brother had vanished, the same place that held so many unanswered questions, and hearing his voice call out to you from the darkness. What do you do? What would you feel? Fear? Confusion? Excitement? Or maybe something else entirely, something deeper, more instinctual, that tells you that this isn't just a coincidence. This is a message. But what is the message? And who or what is sending it? Now, I'm not going to give it all away just yet. You'll have to keep watching to uncover the truth for yourself. But what I will say is that Emma's search for answers will lead her to confront not just the mysteries of her brother's disappearance but the dark, hidden secrets of the very forest that holds so many memories. And just when you think you have it all figured out, there will be another twist, another layer of the mystery that makes everything seem even more impossible. So, stay with me as we venture deeper into the woods, into the unknown, and into a story that will keep you guessing until the very last moment. The truth is closer than you think, but trust me, it's not going to be easy to find. Are you ready to uncover the answers? Are you ready to find out what really happened to Jason? Stay tuned, because the mystery is about to unfold. As Emma sat by the campfire that night, staring into the flickering flames, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. It had been over 2 decades since Jason disappeared without a trace, but the ache in her chest felt as raw as it had the day he went missing. She had tried everything to move on, to put the past behind her. The endless therapy sessions, the well-meaning attempts from friends and family to help her heal, it all seemed like a distant memory now. Emma had spent years pretending to be okay, burying her grief under layers of daily life, trying to act as though her brother's disappearance hadn't left an unfillable hole in her heart. But deep down, she knew the truth, she hadn't truly moved on. Just a few months before that fateful night, Emma had returned to the town she had grown up in, hoping that the familiar surroundings would bring her some peace, some clarity. She had kept in touch with a few childhood friends over the years, people who still lived in the area, people who still remembered Jason. Their memories were a mix of laughter and sadness. Jason had been the life of the party, always cracking jokes, always up to something. Emma often wondered how her life would have turned out if that one camping trip hadn't taken him from her, from all of them. It was as if he had just disappeared into thin air. No one had seen him leave the campsite, no one had heard anything unusual. It was as though the woods themselves had swallowed him whole, leaving behind nothing but an eerie silence. But that silence, Emma hadn't been able to shake it. There was always something off about that night. Something that no one could explain, something that the police had dismissed as inconclusive. As a child, she had never questioned the details of the case, assuming the authorities knew what they were doing. But now, as an adult, those unanswered questions were beginning to eat away at her. It didn't help that there had been no closure, no body, no leads, nothing. Emma's search for answers had recently become more obsessive. Late at night, she would scour old news articles, rewatch interviews with the investigators, and try to piece together any shred of evidence that might explain what had happened. Every time she thought she was getting close to an answer, the case seemed to slip further away from her grasp. Then came the whispers. It had been so subtle at first that she almost brushed it off. After all, it was easy to get lost in the haze of the past when you were in a place that held so many memories. But the whisper didn't go away. It lingered in the back of her mind, like a faint echo of something she wasn't sure she could fully comprehend. Emma hadn't been alone that night. A small group of friends had accompanied her on this trip, most of whom were unfamiliar with the history behind the campsite, which was something Emma had planned intentionally. She didn't want the burden of her grief to taint the trip for anyone else. But even though they didn't know the full story, Emma could tell that some of them were beginning to notice her strange behavior, her sudden silences. They hadn't asked her directly, but she could see the glances, those questioning stares that made her feel like they were beginning to sense something was wrong. There had been one moment, in particular, that had made Emma's heart race. As the group settled around the campfire, they began telling stories, just like everyone does when they're gathered in the woods. But Emma couldn't focus on the stories. Her mind was elsewhere, wandering, consumed with thoughts of Jason. That's when the whisper came again, this time, louder and clearer. At first, she thought someone was playing a prank, maybe one of her friends who had decided to mess with her. But when she looked around, everyone was either staring into the fire or laughing amongst themselves. No one seemed to notice anything strange. Emma's heart pounded in her chest as the whisper seemed to grow louder, as if coming from somewhere right next to her ear. It was Jason's voice. The realization hit her like a freight train. She could feel her breath catch in her throat as she strained to listen, desperate to make sense of what was happening. Was it really him? Could it be? Was it some sort of trick of the mind? But the voice wasn't distorted or distant, it was clear and unmistakable. She could hear the familiar tone, the cadence of his words, the slight laugh that had always been his signature. The worst part was, Emma couldn't tell anyone about it. Not yet. Not until she knew more. What if it wasn't him? What if it was something else entirely, something darker and more sinister than she was ready to confront? As she sat there, trapped in the tension of the moment, Emma's mind began to race. She thought back to the last few years, trying to find some explanation, some rational reason for this eerie phenomenon. Her friends had begun to sense her unease, and some of them had grown concerned. Derek, one of the childhood friends who had joined her on this trip, had been particularly attentive. He was always the one to keep things light-hearted, always the first to crack a joke to lift the mood, but even he seemed to sense that something was wrong. Derek had been a constant in Emma's life after Jason's disappearance, and the two of them had shared a strange bond since that day. He was supportive, always there when Emma needed him, but Emma couldn't help but feel that there was more to Derek than met the eye. He knew too much about her brother, about the details of Jason's disappearance, more than he should, perhaps. She never questioned it before, chalking it up to his close friendship with both of them, but in the back of her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that there was something Derek wasn't telling her. Was he hiding something? Was he somehow involved in Jason's disappearance? Emma's mind spiraled as she considered the possibility that someone she trusted might not be who they appeared to be. Could Derek have been involved in Jason's disappearance all those years ago? Or was he, like her, simply trying to uncover the truth? There was no way to know for sure, not yet. But the whispers, the strange occurrences, they were only the beginning. And as Emma tried to make sense of it all, she realized that the answers she sought might come from unexpected places. The woods, it seemed, were not just a place of memories, they were a place where secrets were buried, waiting to be unearthed. But there was something else, too. Something that had been nagging at her ever since the night by the campfire. Was it possible that someone had been following her? Had someone been watching her, waiting for the right moment to reveal themselves? The tension was building, and Emma knew that she was getting closer to the truth, even if that truth was something she wasn't ready to face. The question wasn't if Jason had been taken, it was who had taken him. And why? The days that followed that strange night by the campfire felt like an eerie blur. Emma couldn't stop thinking about the whisper, couldn't shake the feeling that she had heard Jason's voice, calling to her from beyond the veil of time and memory. It was as though the world had shifted, as though everything she thought she knew about her brother's disappearance was suddenly in question. But each time she tried to talk to someone about what had happened, A knot of doubt twisted in her stomach. Could she really trust her own perception? Could she trust anyone else? She felt like she was walking on a razor's edge, torn between the undeniable pull of that voice and the logical part of her brain that warned her to be careful. There were too many questions, and not enough answers. Despite her inner turmoil, Emma tried to stay focused. She had returned to the town to uncover the truth, and she wasn't about to let some strange occurrence deter her. Her friends, particularly Derek, had started to notice how much she had been spiraling, but none of them knew what it felt like to lose a sibling, to lose someone you loved in a way that defied all logic and reason. Derek kept pushing her to let go, to stop obsessing over the past and move forward with her life. He suggested that maybe it was time to leave the town behind, that maybe the answer she was seeking was something she couldn't find here. But Emma wasn't ready to accept that. She couldn't. Not when she felt in her gut that there was something buried in this place, something she needed to uncover, no matter how painful it might be. It was the disappearance of a key piece of evidence that began to turn everything upside down. Emma had been digging through old records at the local library, trying to piece together any forgotten detail from the investigation that might shed light on what had happened that night in the woods. Among the dusty files, she had found something unusual, an old police report that mentioned a witness who had seen a strange car parked near the campsite on the night of Jason's disappearance. The report, buried under layers of paperwork, was incomplete, but it was a lead she hadn't seen before. Her heart raced as she carefully copied down the details, knowing that this could be the breakthrough she had been waiting for. She immediately began to research the car's registration and the witness's name, feeling the excitement of being on the cusp of something important. But the next day, when she returned to the library to continue her investigation, the report was gone. Completely gone. At first, Emma thought she had just misplaced it, maybe left it somewhere in the stack of papers she had been sorting through. She searched the entire library, retracing her steps, but it was as if the report had vanished into thin air. The librarians, who had seen her working, seemed oddly unfazed by her panic, brushing it off as if it wasn't unusual for things to go missing in the stacks. But Emma knew better. She had seen that report with her own eyes. Someone, it seemed, was working against her, someone who didn't want her to uncover the truth. In the days that followed, more things went wrong. Emma's car, which had been parked outside her apartment, was broken into, though nothing of value was taken. The only thing that had been disturbed was a folder she had kept with notes and documents about Jason's disappearance. Whoever had gotten into her car had gone through every single page, though they hadn't left a trace of their presence. She felt as though a shadow was following her, someone or something always one step ahead, preventing her from getting any closer to the answers she so desperately sought. It was as if she was being watched, hunted by an invisible force that was determined to keep the past buried. Then, there was the warning. It came one evening when she was walking back to her apartment after a long day of fruitless searching. As she rounded the corner, she saw a figure standing by the entrance of her building. It was Derek. He had that look on his face again, the one he always wore when he was worried, but this time, there was something darker behind his eyes. He stepped forward, blocking her path as she approached. "You need to stop, Emma," he said, his voice low and urgent, almost pleading. "It's too much. You're not going to find anything. Just let it go." Emma froze. There was a strange tension in the air, a heaviness she couldn't quite explain. She looked up at Derek, trying to read his expression, but it was hard to make sense of it. He had always been there for her, always supported her in the aftermath of Jason's disappearance, but this was different. There was a finality in his tone, a quiet desperation that made her stomach twist. "Derek, she began, but he cut her off. "I'm serious," he said, his voice now sharp and insistent. "You don't understand what you're dealing with. Some things are better left alone." There it was again, the feeling that something was being kept from her. Was Derek hiding something? Had he known more than he had ever let on about the night Jason disappeared? Emma felt a chill creep up her spine as the pieces of the puzzle she had been slowly gathering began to feel like they were slipping through her fingers. It wasn't just about finding Jason anymore. It was about finding the truth, no matter what the cost, even if it meant confronting those she trusted most. "Why are you saying this?" Emma asked, her voice trembling slightly. "Why are you trying to stop me? What do you know?" Derek's eyes flickered, and for a brief moment, Emma thought she saw something dark, something she hadn't noticed before, flash across his face. But just as quickly as it appeared, it was gone, replaced by that familiar, reassuring smile. The next few days were a blur of confusion and fear for Emma. She couldn't shake the feeling that someone was out there, watching her every move, orchestrating events from behind the scenes, and no matter how hard she tried to make sense of the strange occurrences, the pieces just wouldn't fit together. The missing report, the break-in, Derek's cryptic warning, it all felt like a tangled web of secrets and lies, and the deeper she dug, the more she realized that no one was as trustworthy as they seemed. But what really unsettled her was the fact that she wasn't the only one who seemed to be receiving strange messages. It started with Sarah, one of Emma's childhood friends who had stayed in touch over the years. Sarah was someone Emma had always trusted, someone who had been there for her during the darkest days after Jason's disappearance. They had shared the pain of losing Jason together, both grieving in their own ways, but Sarah had always remained the more practical one, the one who tried to keep things grounded. Sarah had even encouraged Emma to face the reality of the situation, to let go of the idea that Jason might still be out there. But Sarah was about to experience something that would turn her world upside down, and in doing so, complicate Emma's search for the truth in ways she never expected. It was late one night when Sarah called Emma, her voice barely more than a whisper. "Emma, you won't believe what just happened," she said, her words rushed and frantic. "I got a letter, it's addressed to me, but it's got Jason's handwriting on it." Emma felt her blood run cold. "What do you mean? How could that be possible?" she demanded, already half knowing the answer but refusing to let herself believe it. Sarah explained that she had received a letter in the mail, an envelope with no return address, and inside, a single sheet of paper with Jason's unmistakable handwriting. The letter simply read, "I'm still here. Don't stop looking." Emma's heart raced. This was too much. The whisper at the campfire, the message to Sarah, there was a pattern here, something bigger than what she had first thought. But why Sarah? Why now? What was the significance of this letter, and why had it been sent to her instead of Emma? The question of why it was addressed to Sarah gnawed at Emma, and she couldn't shake the feeling that she had missed something critical in her own investigation, something that might now be out of her control. Desperate for answers, Emma immediately drove to Sarah's house. When she arrived, Sarah was waiting for her, her face pale, her hands trembling as she clutched the letter like it was a lifeline. Emma could see the fear in her eyes, the same fear that had taken hold of her after that whisper by the campfire. Together, they sat in Sarah's living room, trying to make sense of the cryptic note. The handwriting was undeniably Jason's, and the words themselves felt hauntingly familiar, as if Jason had been watching them from somewhere far away, urging them to keep going, to keep searching, to refuse to give up on the truth. But the more they tried to dissect the meaning, the less it made sense. Was this a message from Jason? Or was someone else trying to manipulate them into believing something that wasn't real? Emma felt the weight of the situation pressing down on her. What did this new piece of evidence mean? Was it part of the same twisted game that had been playing out since Jason's disappearance, or was it something entirely different, something more sinister? She couldn't ignore the fact that this letter only deepened the mystery. Who would go to such lengths to make Sarah believe that Jason was still alive? Who had access to his handwriting, his personal belongings? And, most importantly, why had Sarah, someone who had been close to Emma, been targeted with this message instead of her? But the more Emma thought about it, the more everything seemed to spiral out of control. She remembered something from Jason's past that had always seemed unimportant at the time, a small, hidden detail that now felt like it might hold the key to everything. Back when Jason had gone missing, there were rumors circulating about strange events leading up to his disappearance, unexplained phone calls, odd encounters with people who no one seemed to know, and a few cryptic messages that Jason had left behind in the weeks before he vanished. At the time, they had all been dismissed as nothing more than coincidence. But now, those stories were starting to take on a new, much darker significance. Could it be that Jason had been involved in something deeper, something darker than they had ever imagined? And if so, who else was involved in his disappearance? Emma couldn't ignore the feeling that someone had been playing this game for far longer than she had realized, and now, that someone had set their sights on Sarah. It was late the following evening when the tension finally broke. Emma had been pacing in her apartment, trying to gather her thoughts, when her phone rang. It was a blocked number. She hesitated for a moment, then answered, her pulse quickening. "Emma," came the voice on the other end of the line, a voice she didn't recognize, but that carried with it an unmistakable weight of authority and threat. "You need to stop looking for him. You're digging in places you don't belong." The voice was cold, almost emotionless, but there was a deep, underlying menace that made Emma's stomach drop. "There are things better left buried. You won't like what you find." Emma's breath caught in her throat. She tried to respond, but the line went dead before she could speak. She stared at her phone, her mind racing with questions. Who was that? What did they know? And why did they seem so determined to stop her from uncovering the truth? The timing of the call, coming so soon after Sarah's letter, felt like too much of a coincidence to ignore. Whoever was behind this knew exactly what she was doing, knew exactly where she was looking, and they were willing to go to any lengths to stop her from finding out. In the days that followed, Emma's sense of dread only deepened. She began to feel the walls closing in, as if everyone around her was hiding something. Derek, Sarah, even the investigators who had long since abandoned the case, they all seemed to be holding back, concealing truths she couldn't yet understand. She found herself questioning everything and everyone. Was Derek's warning genuine concern for her safety, or was it a veiled threat, a warning that if she didn't back off, there would be consequences? Was Sarah's sudden involvement a coincidence, or was she being manipulated by someone else, someone who had a vested interest in keeping the truth hidden? And what about the strange phone call? Was it a real threat, or was someone trying to scare her into submission? As Emma grappled with these questions, she realized that the deeper she went, the more she became tangled in a web of lies and deception, one that threatened to consume her entirely. The mystery of Jason's disappearance had become far more complex than she could have ever imagined, and the stakes were rising higher with every passing day. The truth, it seemed, was more elusive than ever, and Emma wasn't sure if she was getting closer to it or if she was simply being lured deeper into a trap that had been set long before she arrived. One thing was certain, though, the game had changed. And Emma was no longer just fighting to find her brother. She was fighting for her own survival. Emma could feel the danger creeping up on her, slipping through the cracks of her every waking moment. The sensation had been growing for days now, a subtle pressure that gnawed at her from the inside. It wasn't just the whispers or the mysterious letter that Sarah had received, it was the overwhelming sense that someone was always watching, waiting for her to make the next move. It was a feeling so visceral that it made her skin crawl. She hadn't told anyone yet, because who could she trust? Derek, with his warnings and his strange behavior, had only deepened the unease. Sarah, now tangled up in the strange messages, seemed just as lost and confused as Emma, but more and more, Emma wondered if the people closest to her might be part of something darker than she could fathom. She couldn't explain it, but the world around her felt off-kilter, like she was trapped in a puzzle where the pieces didn't quite fit. It was that feeling that made Emma's decision to go back to the woods, to the campsite where everything had started, feel inevitable. She had to face it. She had to. But even as she drove out there, the familiar, thick trees surrounding her like silent sentinels, the heavy weight of the past pressed down on her chest. She thought of Jason, of his smile, of his laugh, and of that chilling moment by the campfire when she had heard his voice. It couldn't have been a coincidence. She needed answers, but the closer she got to them, the more she realized that the truth might not be something she was ready to face. It might not even be something she could survive. Her gut had been telling her something was off ever since she left the safety of her apartment and headed back into those woods. But nothing could have prepared her for what she found when she arrived. The campsite, the one where Jason had disappeared, looked the same as it had in her memories, secluded, quiet, peaceful. Too peaceful. Emma stood in the clearing, feeling a strange pull toward the spot where they had all camped that night, her heart beating erratically. She had told herself she needed to be here to look for clues, but deep down, she knew it was because something inside her was desperate to feel close to Jason again, to reach across the vast chasm of time and loss. But as she stood there, feeling the weight of the silence pressing in, her phone buzzed in her pocket, breaking the spell. It was a text message from Sarah. "I'm scared, Emma. I don't know what to do. Someone is watching me." Emma's blood ran cold as her fingers trembled over the screen. What do you mean? Who? She typed back, her heart hammering. I don't know. I keep hearing noises outside my house at night. And the car. I think someone's been in my car. I found fingerprints on the window. I don't know what's happening. I think it's all connected to Jason. I think whoever is doing this is trying to stop us from finding the truth. Emma's chest tightened. She quickly typed back, don't go outside. I'm coming to you. I'll be there in a few hours. But even as she hit send, something inside her shifted. The urgency in Sarah's words, her fear, felt too real. Emma had been so caught up in her own investigation that she had ignored the possibility that someone might be targeting Sarah too, pulling her into this web of lies, manipulation, and fear. She had never considered that Sarah might be in direct danger. She had always been a steady presence, someone Emma could rely on. But now, the lines between friend and foe felt blurred. What if Sarah was being manipulated, just like Emma had been? What if Sarah knew more than she was letting on? The possibilities were terrifying, and Emma was starting to feel like she was sinking deeper into a nightmare she couldn't wake up from. But before she could act on her decision to go back and check on Sarah, another text came through, this one from an unknown number. You're too close. Stop digging. Or it won't be just Sarah you have to worry about. The message was chilling, short, and to the point. Emma's hands shook as she read it. Who was this? What did they want from her? It was clear now that someone didn't just want her to stop searching, they wanted her to be afraid, to feel the weight of this threat pressing down on her at every moment. Someone was playing a game with her, a game where the stakes were far higher than she could have ever imagined. She thought back to the mysterious phone call, to the voice that had warned her to stop, and now, this text. It was all connected, but the pieces seemed to be slipping further out of her grasp with every passing second. In a haze of fear and confusion, Emma didn't hesitate. She turned on her heel and sprinted back to her car, desperate to reach Sarah before it was too late. But as she drove, her mind raced with questions. Why was she so certain that she was being followed? Why did it feel as though someone was shadowing her, staying just out of sight, waiting for her to slip up? As she passed the familiar landmarks along the way, her eyes darted nervously in the rearview mirror. The unsettling feeling that someone was tailing her became undeniable. She wasn't imagining it. There was a black sedan a few cars behind her, and every time she glanced back, it was still there, moving in perfect sync with her. Her heartbeat quickened as she tried to focus on the road ahead, but every few seconds, she couldn't help herself, she checked the rearview mirror again. The sedan was still there. She turned onto a different street, hoping to throw off whoever was following her, but when she glanced back again, the car was right behind her, just as before. Her grip tightened on the steering wheel as the panic began to set in. Was this just some random driver? Or was someone out there, someone who didn't want her to make it to Sarah? Every instinct told her to pull over, to confront the person following her, but that would have been a mistake. She knew it. This was no coincidence. Whoever was behind that will knew exactly where she was going. They had been tracking her movements for days, maybe longer. The paranoia was overwhelming, and Emma could barely think straight as the minutes stretched on, the sedan never losing ground. Finally, as she approached Sarah's neighborhood, Emma pulled into a side street, trying to lose the car. She turned sharply at the next intersection, hoping to break away, but when she looked back again, the sedan was gone. For a moment, she thought she might have shaken them off, but as she parked a few houses down from Sarah's, she saw something that made her blood run cold. Sarah's car was parked in the driveway, but the front door to the house was wide open. Not just ajar, completely open. The house was dark. Emma's heart raced in her chest as she threw open the door to her car, her body moving on autopilot. She rushed to Sarah's front door, calling her name, but no answer came. The silence that greeted her felt suffocating, a silence that seemed too loud, too heavy. The air smelled stale, as though no one had been home for hours, but Sarah's car was still there, parked as though she had just stepped inside. Emma's mind screamed at her to be careful, to think logically, but all she could hear was the pounding of her own heartbeat, louder than the silence around her. She stepped inside, her eyes scanning every inch of the darkened hallway. The hairs on the back of her neck stood up as she felt that unmistakable sensation again, the feeling that someone was in the house with her. And that's when she saw it, a small, crumpled note on the floor by the door, half hidden behind a table. With trembling hands, Emma bent down and picked it up. The note read simply, "You're next." The room seemed to close in around her. The terror in her chest swelled as she realized with sickening clarity that she was no longer just searching for answers. She was part of something much darker, something far more dangerous than she had ever anticipated. And whoever was behind it all, whoever had been playing this twisted game, wasn't done yet. Emma stood frozen, her hand still clutching the crumpled note, her mind racing in 1,000 directions at once. The words "you're next" echoed in her ears, louder than the silence that enveloped the room. Her breath came in shallow gasps, and her heart hammered in her chest as the weight of the situation finally settled on her like a suffocating cloud. The house was still, too still. She had been here before, in this exact moment, but nothing had ever felt this real. Nothing had ever felt this close. She was caught, trapped in the center of a web that she didn't understand, one that was tightening with every passing second. Her thoughts were a blur of fear, confusion, and dread. The game had changed once again, but now, she wasn't sure if it had ever really been the same game to begin with. But it was then that the door creaked, a soft, unsettling sound that sliced through the tension like a knife. Emma froze, every muscle in her body going rigid. Was someone inside? Was Sarah here, or had whoever had been following her made it to the house first? The seconds stretched out, too long to bear, and her mind raced with 100 possible scenarios. Slowly, she turned her head toward the source of the noise, but nothing could have prepared her for what she saw. Standing in the doorway of the living room, looking every bit like a ghost from her past, was Derek. The man who had been her protector, her friend, the one who had always warned her to stay safe, to stop digging, to walk away before it was too late. The same Derek who had cautioned her about the dangers of going too deep into Jason's disappearance. But now, his face was different, there was something colder about him, something harder in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Something about the way he was standing, a bit too still, a bit too deliberate, made the hairs on the back of Emma's neck stand on end. She hadn't heard him arrive. She hadn't seen him through the windows. But here he was, like he had always been a part of this dark, twisted game from the very beginning. "Derek," Emma whispered, her voice shaking, her heart sinking as she tried to understand what was happening. "What are you doing here? Where's Sarah?" Derek didn't answer right away. He just stood there, looking at her, his face unreadable. The silence between them stretched, and Emma's mind began to fill with 1,000 questions, none of which seemed to make sense. Had Derek been the one following her? Had he somehow orchestrated all of this? She had trusted him. She had relied on him to help her understand the mysteries surrounding Jason's disappearance. But now, with his cold stare and his unsettling presence, she wasn't sure she could trust him at all. "Derek," she asked again, her voice barely more than a whisper. The words trembled on her lips as she took a step forward. "Where's Sarah? What's going on?" Finally, Derek spoke. His voice was low, almost flat, and it sent a chill through her spine. "You shouldn't have come here, Emma," he said, his words heavy with a finality she hadn't expected. "You've gone too far. You should have listened to me." Emma's pulse quickened. There was something in his tone, something detached and ominous that made her stomach churn. She wanted to believe there was an explanation, that this was just another piece of the puzzle that she could put together, but everything in her screamed that she was missing something critical, something huge. "Too far," Emma repeated, her voice growing stronger, though she could feel her fear creeping in. "What are you talking about, Derek?" "I'm just trying to find the truth. I need to know what happened to Jason. I need to understand why all of this is happening." She stopped herself, the words choking in her throat. The reality of what she was about to ask hit her with such force that she almost couldn't bring herself to say it. But she had to. She needed to know. "You know something, don't you? You've been hiding something. What aren't you telling me?" For a moment, Derek didn't move, and the room felt as though it were closing in on Emma, the walls pressing in, squeezing out every ounce of air. Then, to her shock, Derek stepped forward, his eyes locking onto hers with a cold intensity that made her blood run cold. It's not what you think, Derek said, his voice low but firm. It was never about Jason. It was about you. All along, it was always about you. Emma blinked, unsure if she had heard him correctly. What do you mean? She asked, her voice trembling as the pieces of the story she thought she understood began to fall apart around her. What's this really about, Derek? He took another step closer, his eyes never leaving hers. I didn't want to get you involved in this, but it's too late now. It's all been set into motion. You never really knew, did you, Emma? You never realized what you were really looking for. You've been chasing a ghost. Emma felt like the ground beneath her was being pulled away. She tried to piece together his words, but they didn't fit. It didn't make sense. All this time, she had believed she was looking for Jason, searching for her brother, trying to unravel the mystery of his disappearance. But now, Derek was telling her it had never been about him at all. But then what had she been searching for? And why had Derek been so intent on stopping her from getting to the truth? Stop lying to me, Derek, Emma shouted, her emotions spiraling. What do you know? What aren't you telling me? Derek's face remained emotionless as he took another step closer, his gaze piercing. What you don't understand, Emma, is that Jason was never really gone. Not in the way you think. He's been here the whole time, just not the way you thought he would be. Emma's mind reeled, unable to keep up with the turn her life had just taken. Her heart hammered in her chest as she stared at Derek, her hands shaking. What was he saying? What was he implying? And then, just as she thought she might break under the weight of it all, Derek's lips curled into the faintest of smiles, a smile that didn't reach his eyes. It was always about you, he repeated, his voice barely a whisper now. You were never supposed to find out the truth, Emma. You were never supposed to be part of this. Before Emma could process what he meant, Derek's phone buzzed in his pocket. He pulled it out, checked the screen, and his expression changed, hardening into something more urgent, more dangerous. Without another word, he turned on his heel and walked toward the door, the sound of his footsteps fading into the silence. Don't go looking for Sarah, Derek called over his shoulder. You won't find her. And when you do, you'll wish you never did. The door slammed behind him, and Emma stood frozen, her mind in chaos. Nothing made sense anymore. All of her assumptions, all of her conclusions, had been shattered in an instant. Derek wasn't just a part of this mystery, he was at its very center. The things she had believed about Jason's disappearance, about Sarah's involvement, about everything, now felt like lies. There was something bigger at play here, something far darker than she had ever realized. And as Emma stood there, a growing sense of dread consumed her. She knew one thing for sure, the truth was still out there, but now, the question wasn't just what had happened to Jason, it was what had happened to her. The silence in Sarah's house was deafening, and yet, in the moments after Derek's departure, Emma felt more suffocated than ever. She couldn't bring herself to move, her mind still reeling from the fragments of information that Derek had dropped like scattered puzzle pieces she wasn't sure how to fit together. Jason was never really gone. What did that even mean? And why had Derek, of all people, been so cryptic, so intent on pushing her away from the truth, as though everything she had been searching for had always been a trap meant to ensnare her? The chaos of the past few days weighed on her like an anchor, pulling her deeper into a sea of confusion and fear she couldn't escape from. Her phone buzzed in her pocket, pulling her out of the haze of uncertainty. She glanced at the screen, expecting to see another message from Sarah, but instead, it was an unknown number. Hesitating for only a moment, Emma answered, her breath catching in her throat as she braced herself for whatever came next. The voice on the other end was familiar, too familiar, and for a split second, Emma thought she might collapse where she stood. Emma, the voice said softly, but there was no mistaking who it was. It was Sarah. I'm sorry. I didn't mean for any of this to happen. But you need to listen to me right now. You need to stop. Emma's stomach turned at the urgency in Sarah's voice. Sarah, what's going on? Where are you? Are you okay? There was a long pause on the other end, the kind of silence that made Emma's heart race with dread. I'm not okay, Emma. This whole thing, it's been bigger than we realized. I tried to protect you, I really did, but you have to understand that the truth about Jason, it isn't something we're supposed to find out. It's too dangerous. And now they're watching me. I don't know how much time I have before they come for me. Emma's blood ran cold, her grip tightening on the phone. Who's watching you, Sarah? What's going on? You have to tell me the truth, please. I can't explain it all right now, Sarah said, her voice breaking. But you're at the center of it all, Emma. It's always been you. You've been asking the wrong questions. It was never just about Jason, it was about you, your connection to this whole thing. And if you keep going, if you keep digging, they won't stop. They'll come for you too. Emma's mind spun, the weight of Sarah's words settling on her like a suffocating fog. She had never felt more alone than she did in this moment. All her life, she had believed that finding Jason, uncovering the truth about his disappearance, would give her the answers she needed to put everything right. But now, the world she had known, the people she had trusted, were unraveling before her eyes. Was Sarah truly in danger, or had she been lying this whole time? Was Derek part of this, or was he also a victim? Everything Emma thought she knew about the situation seemed to be a lie. Sarah, please, Emma whispered, barely able to steady her voice. I don't understand. What am I supposed to do? There was another long pause on the other end of the line, and when Sarah spoke again, her voice was barely audible. You have to make a choice, Emma. You can keep looking for the truth, but it will destroy you. It will destroy everyone you love. Or you can walk away. It's the only way to survive this. You have to let it go. Emma's mind was spinning. Walk away. She couldn't. Not now, not after everything. Jason deserved to be found. He deserved justice. And so did Sarah. But what if Sarah was right? What if continuing down this path would destroy everything? Emma wasn't sure she could live with herself if she stopped now, but at the same time, the fear creeping into Sarah's voice was undeniable. She had seen too much, learned too much, there was no going back from that. I can't just stop, Sarah, Emma finally said, her voice shaking with the weight of the decision she was being forced to make. You know I can't. This isn't just about Jason anymore. It's about what they've done to us, to our lives. It's about the truth. I can't let them get away with this. Please, Emma, Sarah begged. Please, you don't understand. This isn't just a mystery. It's a trap. And if you keep pushing, if you keep digging, you'll lose everything. They'll come for you. They'll make sure you never get out of this alive. The finality in Sarah's voice hit Emma harder than anything else had. She was being asked to choose between everything she had been fighting for and the promise of safety. The safety that Sarah was offering, a safety that Emma didn't even know was real. But the choice wasn't just hers to make. Her heart ached with the weight of it. She didn't want to be a coward, to turn away from the truth, but the fear in Sarah's voice, the fear that had never been there before, was like a warning bell ringing in Emma's ears. If she kept going, what would be left? Who would be left? Sarah. Emma started, but her words caught in her throat as a new thought struck her with the force of a lightning bolt. What if Sarah had already made a choice? What if she was already too deep into whatever conspiracy or danger was lurking behind this? What if Sarah was involved in this, not just as a victim, but as a willing participant? The possibility gnawed at Emma's insides. Could Sarah have been hiding something from her? Had everything they had shared been a lie? Listen to me, Emma, Sarah interrupted, her voice trembling. I can't explain everything right now. But there are things you don't know, things you can't know. If you keep going, you'll be digging your own grave. You'll be digging your own grave and mine too. The line went dead. Emma stood there, staring at the phone in her hand as if the answers could somehow reveal themselves if she just looked hard enough. But there was nothing. No answers. No clarity. Just a ringing in her ears that made her feel like she was losing control. She was at the edge now, standing on a precipice, and every step she took forward seemed to push her deeper into darkness. She had always believed that the truth was worth whatever it cost. But what if the cost was too high? What if it wasn't just her life on the line, but everyone she cared about? What if she couldn't trust anyone anymore? Derek. Sarah. Even her memories of Jason, how much of that was real? How much of it had been distorted by whatever dark force was pulling the strings behind the scenes? Every instinct told her to push forward, to keep searching for the truth. But as she looked at the house around her, the walls that had once seemed like a place of safety now felt like a prison. She could feel the weight of the choice bearing down on her, suffocating her with its impossible nature. Was there even a right choice anymore? Or was she already too far gone to turn back? Her phone buzzed again, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. This time, the message was from an unknown number. She hesitated before opening it, the weight of the decision already pressing on her like an unbearable force. It's too late for you to turn back. You've made your choice. The message was signed simply, "They know." The ground beneath Emma's feet felt unstable as she stared at the screen. She had already made her choice, whether she realized it or not. But who were they? And what had she just stepped into? The walls were closing in, and the answers felt farther away than ever. Emma's pulse raced as she stared at the message on her phone, her heart pounding against her chest. They know. It wasn't a warning. It was a declaration. A cold, unforgiving fact that seemed to echo in her mind, growing louder with each passing second. She had crossed a line, and now there was no way back. The walls that had once seemed like a place of refuge now felt like they were closing in around her, suffocating her with their sheer weight. She could feel it in the air, the shift, the pressure that was building, and it was only a matter of time before everything erupted. Her phone buzzed again, but this time, it was a call. She didn't hesitate. She answered quickly, her breath shallow, not sure what to expect. Emma, Sarah's voice came through the line, but it wasn't the voice she had heard before. It was tight, desperate, almost unrecognizable. You have to leave. Now. They know everything, and they're coming for you. They're already inside. The call abruptly cut off, and Emma's stomach lurched. Inside. What did she mean? Who was inside? Her mind scrambled for answers as her thoughts crashed together in a whirlwind of panic and confusion. She bolted from the living room, every instinct screaming at her to run, to get out of the house, but she had no idea where to go, no place that felt safe anymore. She didn't make it to the door before a loud bang sounded from upstairs. A door slammed open, followed by heavy footsteps, and before Emma could react, Derek's voice called down to her from the staircase, cold and commanding. You're running out of time, Emma. You're already too deep. She froze, her breath caught in her throat. Derek. The same man who had warned her to stop, who had been there through all of this, now stood before her, and everything she thought she knew was turning to dust in her hands. His face, once familiar and comforting, was now a mask of cold indifference. His eyes were dark with something far more dangerous than she had ever realized. You set this up, Emma breathed, the realization striking her like a physical blow. You knew all along. You've been lying to me, haven't you? Derek didn't flinch. He didn't even look surprised by her accusation. You really think it's just about Jason? This whole thing, you're so far out of your depth, Emma. You've been playing a part in something much bigger than you ever understood. His voice was devoid of emotion, but there was a hardness to it that sent a shiver through her spine. They've been watching you for years, waiting for the right moment. And you've just handed them what they need. Emma took a step back, every instinct screaming for her to run, but the weight of his words kept her rooted to the spot. What are you talking about? Who is they? What do you want from me? Derek's gaze darkened, and for the first time, a flicker of something almost human crossed his face, regret, maybe, or guilt. But it vanished quickly, replaced by the same cold indifference. I never wanted you to get caught up in this, he said, his voice low, as though speaking to himself. But it's too late now. They know everything about you, about your family. They've been waiting for you to find them, Emma. And now you have. And you've made it impossible for any of us to back out. The world around Emma seemed to close in on her, the walls pressing down, suffocating her. You're part of this, Derek. You've always been part of it, haven't you? This wasn't just about protecting me. It was about keeping me in the dark. Keeping me from seeing the truth. Derek didn't answer, but the cold, calculating look in his eyes was answer enough. The betrayal hit her like a physical blow, sharper than any words could have been. The man she had trusted, who had been her ally, her protector, was just another player in this twisted game. He had been feeding her lies, leading her down a path she couldn't escape. But why? What was the purpose? And who were these people, they who had been watching her all along? Before she could process any of it, the door to the house burst open. Another figure entered, tall, menacing, and as unfamiliar as the storm of chaos swirling around her. Emma's heart skipped a beat. He wasn't just a stranger. He was someone she'd seen before, a fleeting memory from the past that she couldn't quite place. His cold, calculating eyes locked onto hers as he took a step forward. "You've caused enough problems, Emma," he said, his voice smooth and calm, like he was delivering a simple order. "It's time to end this." Derek didn't move, didn't flinch. He just stood there, watching. Emma's mind raced, but there was no time to process the mounting confusion. She was being cornered, trapped in a game where every move she made seemed to push her further into danger. The man was getting closer, his presence suffocating her as she backed up against the wall. "I don't know what's happening," Emma whispered, her voice barely audible. "I don't know who you are, or why you're doing this." The man smirked, stepping closer until he was just inches away. His breath was cold against her skin. "You were never supposed to find out," he said softly. "But now that you have, you'll never be able to walk away. Not when you know too much." Emma's thoughts whirled, and panic clawed at her insides. What was he talking about? What had she uncovered? Everything, the whispers, the threats, the lies, was coming together in a blur, but the truth was still a million miles away. She couldn't breathe, couldn't think, as the man's cold fingers brushed against her arm. "You have a choice, Emma," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "You can keep digging, keep pushing for answers. But understand this, the deeper you go, the more you'll lose. Everything, everyone you care about, will be gone." For the first time, Emma understood the weight of the decision that had been placed in her hands. The truth, the answers she had been seeking so desperately, was not something she could simply take. It was something that would cost her, something that could take everything from her. And the worst part? She wasn't sure if she could stop. She wasn't sure if she even wanted to. The pressure in the room was unbearable, suffocating her, and the man's words were still echoing in her mind. "You'll never be able to walk away." Was he right? Had she already crossed the point of no return? Derek stepped forward, his voice now almost gentle. "You can't win, Emma. Not against them. Not against what's coming." The door slammed open again, and Sarah rushed into the room, her face pale, her eyes wide with panic. She barely glanced at Derek before her gaze locked onto Emma. "They're here, Emma," Sarah gasped, her voice trembling. "They're everywhere. We don't have time. We need to leave, now." But Emma couldn't move. Her mind was too tangled, too overwhelmed by the sheer weight of everything crashing down around her. This wasn't just about Jason anymore. This wasn't just about finding the truth. The truth was something far darker, something far more dangerous than she could have ever imagined. And now, the only thing that mattered was survival. "Emma," Sarah said urgently, her voice shaking with fear. "Please. If we don't go now, it's over." But Emma couldn't bring herself to leave, not yet. Not when she was so close. So close to understanding everything. But at what cost? The room was suffocating, the tension thick and suffused with fear, as Emma stood at the center of it all, every breath heavy with the weight of the decisions she had made. The moment had arrived, and there was no turning back. Derek stood in front of her, his presence an overwhelming force, while the strange man, the one she now knew was part of this tangled web of lies, watched her with cold, calculating eyes. The walls of her world had been torn down, leaving nothing but the raw truth she had been searching for, yet it was more terrifying than she could have ever imagined. Sarah's frantic voice echoed in her mind, urging her to leave, to run, to escape before it was too late. But Emma couldn't move, couldn't tear her eyes away from Derek, the man she thought she could trust. The man who, with every passing moment, revealed more of the treachery that had been hidden in plain sight. The betrayal had gone deeper than she could have ever anticipated, and it wasn't just Derek, it was everyone. They had been playing a game from the very beginning, using her as a pawn, and now she was trapped, caught in a web she could no longer untangle. The truth was a monster, and she had unleashed it. Why? Emma's voice barely reached her own ears, but it held all the pain of the past few days. She could feel her pulse racing, her thoughts spinning. Why did you do this, Derek? Why did you make me believe? She couldn't even finish the sentence, because there were too many lies, too many twisted turns that led her here, to this moment. Derek didn't flinch, didn't even show any sign of remorse. His face remained cold, detached, as if all of this had been part of the plan all along. It's not about you, Emma, he said, his voice steady, even though the darkness in his eyes sent a shiver through her. You were never meant to find out. You were never meant to come this close. But now you have, and now you're too deep to walk away. Emma could feel the walls of the room closing in, the silence between them oppressive. What does that even mean? Her voice cracked, the weight of everything bearing down on her. Why are you doing this? What do you want from me? Derek's lips curled into a slight, almost imperceptible smirk. What do I want? His words were laced with disdain, a contempt that hit Emma like a slap across the face. I wanted you to stay out of it, but you couldn't. You had to keep asking questions. And now, you've uncovered things you don't understand, things you can't possibly comprehend. But that's the cost of curiosity, Emma. Now you're in this, whether you like it or not. Her mind raced. Derek's words felt like a slap in the face, but they didn't make sense. He couldn't be telling her the full story. He couldn't, there had to be more. Everything was leading to this moment, and she could feel the answers just beyond her reach, like the last piece of a puzzle that was waiting to be placed. She had to know what this was about, what had been happening in the shadows while she had been living her life, believing everything was normal. She had to understand, or she would never escape this nightmare. And then it hit her. Her heart stopped, a sharp realization cutting through the chaos. It wasn't just about Jason. It never was. Jason's disappearance, her search, her quest for answers, it had all been a distraction, a carefully constructed lie. She had been a pawn in a game that had far more players than she could have ever known. Everything she thought she knew, every piece of information she had gathered, was part of a much larger puzzle, and she had only just realized that she was looking at it through a cracked mirror. You want me to stop, she said, the realization sinking in like a stone in her gut. You wanted me to stop because you knew I was getting too close. But I'm not the only one. The ones who've been watching me, you've all been in this together. Derek's eyes flickered, a brief moment of hesitation before the mask of indifference returned. I told you, Emma. It's not about you. It's about the bigger picture. About something much more dangerous than you can understand. And you've gotten too close to it now. Too close to the truth. But Emma wasn't listening anymore. Her mind was racing, and she was piecing it all together. The strange man, the threats, Sarah's cryptic warnings, it was all coming together. Everything had led her here, and she knew she was standing at the edge of something terrifying. She didn't have all the answers, but one thing was clear, they had underestimated her. They had thought they could control her, silence her, but Emma wasn't backing down. Not now. She turned toward Sarah, who stood by the door, her face pale, her hands trembling. Sarah, Emma said, her voice steady despite the chaos unfolding around her, we need to end this. Now. Sarah shook her head, a tear slipping down her cheek. You don't understand, Emma. You're too far gone. We're all too far gone. And then, just like that, everything shifted. A loud crash echoed from the other side of the house, followed by hurried footsteps. Someone was here, someone who wasn't part of the game. Emma's heart raced, her thoughts spinning. The door slammed open again, and a new figure appeared in the doorway, someone Emma had never expected to see. It was her father. But he wasn't the same man she had known. He was older, his face drawn, but there was something else, something in his eyes. He wasn't here to protect her. He was here for something far worse. You don't understand what you're dealing with, her father said, his voice low, almost desperate. This has been planned for years, Emma. And now that you're involved, there's no way out. They'll never let you go. Her heart dropped to her stomach. Dad, what are you talking about? He didn't answer. Instead, he turned to Derek, his expression hardening. It's time to finish this. Before she finds out everything. Before it's too late. Emma could barely process the words. Her father, Derek, Sarah, all of them had been lying to her. This wasn't just about a missing person. This wasn't just about Jason. This was about a conspiracy that spanned years, decades even, and she had been at the center of it all along, never knowing that the very people she trusted were the ones who had been manipulating her every step of the way. Her mind was reeling, and before she could make sense of anything, Derek moved toward her, his hand outstretched. "You're too far gone, Emma. There's no turning back now." But as he reached for her, she did the only thing she could think to do. She grabbed the nearby lamp, swinging it in a desperate arc, catching Derek off guard. The force of the blow sent him stumbling back, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Emma had a chance to think, to breathe. Her father moved quickly, closing in on her, but it wasn't him she needed to worry about now. It was the truth that was closing in around her, suffocating her with every breath. She had to make a choice, and she had to make it fast. "Do you want to know the truth, Emma?" her father asked, his voice cold. "Do you really think you're ready for it?" Emma's eyes narrowed. "I don't have a choice anymore." The final truth, the one she'd been avoiding, was staring her in the face. And as everything she knew about her life crumbled around her, she realized that the hardest part wasn't discovering the conspiracy, it was surviving it. Because the real question wasn't whether she could handle the truth. It was whether she could live with what she would have to do to stop it. And as the door slammed shut behind her, she knew one thing for certain: there was no going back. The world around Emma had changed so completely, so radically, that it almost felt like she was living in a different life, one that didn't make sense anymore. The dust had settled, but the air still hung heavy with the weight of everything that had happened. The truth had been uncovered, though it hadn't brought the peace she had imagined. Instead, it had unraveled a reality so much darker than she could have ever understood. There had been moments when she thought she was losing herself entirely, when the walls of the conspiracy closed in so tightly around her that she couldn't breathe. Yet, now that it was all over, now that she was standing on the other side of this nightmare, she realized that the hardest part of all wasn't learning the truth, it was deciding what to do with it. Derek had been arrested, his involvement in the web of lies and manipulation uncovered, though the full scope of his betrayal remained tangled in the shadows. Her father, too, had been taken into custody, but the man he had become in her eyes, the one who had kept so many secrets from her, was someone she couldn't even begin to reconcile with the man she had once trusted. Sarah was safe, but the bond between them was forever fractured, the deep trust they had shared obliterated by the lies, the betrayals, and the unspoken truths. No one, it seemed, was without blame, and yet Emma couldn't quite bring herself to fully hate them. She had learned that sometimes the worst enemies were the ones who smiled the hardest, and the ones you loved most were the ones who could hurt you the deepest. She sat in the quiet of her room, the soft hum of the house around her like a distant memory, as the reality of the past few weeks hit her once more. The revelations had been staggering, but the most painful part of it all was realizing just how far they had gone to keep her in the dark. The whispers at the campfire, the strange coincidences, the hidden messages, all of it had led her down this treacherous path, and it was only through sheer will that she had survived. There was no going back now. The past was gone, and so much had been lost in the process. Jason's disappearance remained unsolved, but Emma had come to terms with the fact that some things, some truths, were too dangerous to uncover. The deeper she dug, the more she realized that some answers were buried for a reason. But even now, as the dust settled, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that something remained just beyond her grasp. There was a lingering question that wouldn't leave her, one that had been gnawing at her for days, and it wasn't about Jason anymore. It was about them. The people who had orchestrated this entire nightmare, the ones who had played her like a pawn in their game. The ones who had been watching her, pulling strings from the shadows, making sure she never found out what they were really up to. Derek, her father, even Sarah, they had all been pawns, too. The conspiracy was bigger than any of them, and even though the people involved had been arrested, there was something about the way they had acted that made Emma wonder if this was really the end. Was it possible that the true masterminds were still out there, waiting? Watching her? She couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that this was far from over. As she stared out the window at the rising sun, a part of her wished she could simply let go, move on with her life, and try to forget everything. But that would never be possible. The questions had already been asked, the doors already opened. No, there was no going back. And then, as if on cue, her phone buzzed. Her heart skipped a beat. It was a message. From an unknown number. You think you're safe now, but you're not. The game isn't over. Not yet. Her hand shook as she read the words. The message was chilling, its simplicity sending a cold shiver down her spine. Emma's mind raced, her stomach tightening. The voice in the back of her head, the one that had been warning her all along, now screamed at her to pay attention. The truth may have been out, but the story was far from finished. With a shaky breath, Emma stood up, her legs unsteady but determined. She had been to hell and back, and she wasn't going to let it all be for nothing. Whatever was waiting for her, whatever came next, she would face it head on. Because there was one thing she had learned: truth was a weapon, and once it was unleashed, it was impossible to put back in the box. She wiped away the last tear she had been holding back, picked up her phone, and hit the reply button. I'm ready. As she sent the message, the weight of what she had just done hit her. But there was no turning back now. The game was still in play, and as much as she hated it, Emma knew that her quest for answers wasn't over. It had only just begun. The screen on her phone flickered, the final message reading, "We'll be watching you." The question lingered in her mind like a shadow, one that would never leave her. Who were they really, and what did they want from her? The story was far from over. And Emma was no longer just a player, she was part of something much bigger, something she couldn't even begin to comprehend. And as she stood there, staring at the phone in her hand, she realized with a jolt of understanding that she would never be able to escape the game. The mystery would always be a part of her, a dark, twisting thread that bound her to something far more dangerous than she had ever imagined. And the world. It would never be the same. I just want you to be safe, he said softly, stepping back to let her pass. Please. Don't dig any deeper. You don't know what you might find. Emma was left standing there, her heart pounding in her chest, as Derek turned and walked away, disappearing into the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that something had just shifted. The warning wasn't just a friendly piece of advice, it was a threat. And that meant only one thing: someone knew something, and they were doing everything they could to stop her from uncovering the truth. But who? Was it Derek? Was he somehow involved in Jason's disappearance? Or was there someone else, someone even closer to her than she realized, pulling the strings from behind the scenes? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making it harder to trust anyone. The walls were closing in, and Emma felt more alone than ever. But despite the warnings, the missing evidence, and the mounting fear that she was getting too close, Emma knew she couldn't stop now. Not when she was so close to the truth. The question was no longer just about what had happened to Jason, it was about who was keeping her from finding out. And why?